Welcome to the podcast, Lighting the Educational Flame, created and produced by educator and author Mark Hoberman, owner and director of Grade Success Tutoring. Mark will be joined by Susan Brender, CEO and host of The Susan Brender Show. The purpose of this program is to offer our listeners a variety of stories dealing with many interesting topics surrounding education. It is our hope that students and parents alike will benefit from the wide range of topics, including study skills, test prep, anti-bullying, sports, music, and more. We hope you enjoy our show, Lighting the Educational Flame.
Hello and welcome to the video podcast, Lighting the Educational Flame, brought to you by Grade Success Education on the NETV network. I am Mark Hoberman and my co-host is Susan Brender. How you doing,
Nice to
Susan?
be here. Oh, I'm just so happy to be with you today.
So glad you're with us. Unfortunately, Susan's picture is all we see now, but maybe she'll join us by video later because of technical issues. Today, our guest will be Brazilian tennis pro Ricardo Acioly. Am I saying your last name right, Ricardo?
Yes, Acioly, yeah.
Ricardo Acioly. Ricardo, welcome to Lighting the Educational Flame.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you guys and, to talk about tennis, about education.
Absolutely. We're going to cover all that. Ricardo, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, Mark, I was born in Brazil, but I went through high school here in U.S. I went through school in U.S. I went to the University of South Carolina, so I'm a Gamecock. I graduated from in Columbia, South Carolina. And after that, I went on to play the tour. I played the ATP Tour, the professional tour. So I was ranked in the top 50 in the world and played Wimbledon, U.S. Open. I played Roland Garros, the French Open, Australian Open. I played the Olympics. I played Davis Cup for Brazil. So I did everything as a player in the high level. And then from then on, I got into coaching and also had quite a successful career into coaching. I coached the Brazilian Davis Cup team. I've coached guys that were like number 1 in top 10, top 15 in the world. Anyway, so I've coached I've had my own academy. I'm a commentator on TV for Brazilian TV. I run one of the biggest tournaments professional tournaments in Brazil, which is the ATP 500 Rio Open. I've been in the board of the ATP, so I've done a lot of tennis. And now I'm at the Evertons Academy here in Boca Raton, Florida.
That's good. When you mention coaching, it's interesting to me that not every phenomenal player can translate to being a phenomenal coach. What is the difference? Why can some people be great but not make others great? I mean, I know this as a teacher a little bit, but in sports, I don't know if it's different. What's your take on that?
Well, I can relate to that because I've seen some of my colleagues that have tried to transcend from player to coach, and they've had difficulties in doing it because a lot of times when you're a player, you do things on your own, you do your things your way, and you find your way to be successful. And a lot of times your way is not your pupil's way, your kid's way, the person that you coach. So you have to kind of transcend a little bit and look it through a different perspective when you're looking at the game, because you look the game in the eyes of your player and not in your own eyes and your own experience. So a lot of times it's not that simple to transcend from that mode to the different modes. So that's why I see sometimes it's great. Some guys can do it and can, jump right on and start, relating to what the player feels and correlating to his own experience and kind of find a way to pass it through, and others can't. I've had some very good friends who are top level players, but in the end they tried coaching and they said, I can't really find a way to communicate and to tune in to the player as much as it is needed. So it's a fine tuning thing, and also a lot of times it's patience. It's a little preparation too. You cannot just basically transcend from player to coaching without reading a little bit, without actually getting prepared. So there's also a process that has to go through.
Mark, I'm going to ask Ricardo something, because I think that during this time of the pandemic, there's been a lot of competition out there, but boy, they don't have an audience. And, I can't imagine how they feel about that, because, when you have an audience, you feel the inspiration, you feel the excitement, and now no excitement. So what do you think about that?
Well, it's, everybody's going through your first, throughout this pandemic, and we're being challenged in a lot of ways. And now players and athletes are being challenged completely when they go back to competition. There's no, the public is not there, the fans, the atmosphere. And it's funny enough, Susan, I was just talking this past week with a friend that won the doubles at the US Open. And we were talking about, hey, how did you feel? You're playing on a stadium that should be maybe, 15, 20,000 people watching you play. And all of a sudden you play one of the biggest matches of your career and there's no one there. There's only you, your partner, your coach, the other guy's coach, the umpires. Some of the courts even had electronic linings. So you didn't have even the regular lines people calling the outer in. So it's really alone, And plus the perspective of being a tennis player, when you're a tennis player, you don't actually communicate with anyone. And in that sense, I think the tennis player can deal with it a little bit better because there's not much interaction with the coach. There's no coaching in men's tennis. You basically, when you go on your court, you're alone. So in that sense, you have to deal with everything that goes on through the match yourself. Now, no stands, no energy, nobody to grab that energy of either cheering for you or against you. And that makes you have to focus quite a bit. So for one side, I think it's beneficial for the players that are not really used to playing on a big courts. Now you can imagine a guy like Djokovic, like Serena, like Roger Federer, like Nadal, and they are used to playing on the main stadiums. Those main stadiums, you can go from 15 to 20,000 people when they're playing. So you can imagine the atmosphere when you go in and it's basically no one there.
Yeah.
They have to deal with that, they don't have that energy to exchange with people around. On the other side, for a player that's not really into that atmosphere all the time. So a player that's like 50, 60, like myself, one of the ground players that were playing, I didn't play all the time on center court. Only when we reached the semifinals, finals, that's when we got into playing the big stadiums. So when you jump into that, there's not really that much pressure either. So in a way, it's good for one. So in the end, it's basically up to the player to kind of put it internal and find a way to focus and kind of have like a practice atmosphere, but at the highest extreme level of, a competition.
I'll tell you something, Ricardo. Years and years ago, I used to go to Forest Hills to watch tennis. And yeah, you did. And it must have been the most exciting thing for you because there was so much energy in the audience. And the players that were in competition with one another were characters. I'm gonna call them characters. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy who used to throw his racket and the other people who would just jump up. You got it, Mark. That's who. And everybody in the audience was so in tune with the tennis and loved it. And today, I don't know, is it the same or is it different?
It has changed. It's unreal, Susan, that you bring this up because I was talking to Chris Evert, who I'm, working at her academy now. And Chris was telling me that the atmosphere of the West Side Tennis Club in New York, in Forest Hills, was so intimate. And actually the players, when they walk on the court, they were really close to the fans. She even said, well, I was walking on the court to go to a final. I even signed an autograph. Nowadays, it's impossible for that to happen. Players are like protected. Right. The game has grown so much in attention and everything. And the players are now a little bit like more of a superstar. You come out of the locker room, you go straight to the court. Right. There is, security people around you. And in those days at the West Side Tennis Club in Forest Hills, it's more relaxed, although there are a lot of people, but the atmosphere is more intimate. And that made tennis be very, people felt really accustomed to be close to a Nili Nastase or, to Chrissy or to all the top stars because they were right there really close to them. Now it's, the court, the US Open court is 23,000 people watching. Wow. Two players, playing against each other. The stadiums are huge now. Everything is on TV, so the attention is a bit different. So it has grown it has gone to the next level. And that intimacy that the Forest Hill event had, it was so great. Also, I loved over there because you were in a club atmosphere. So we would have our locker rooms is within the club. The restaurant is where the members ate and where we also ate. And then we basically walk through the courts and get to the main stadium. So that was unreal. Really fun memories of that time.
I hear you. Something interestingly enough, you are connected with the Chris Evert tennis club, if you will. And how is that? Because Chris Evert, people, when you ask about tennis, her name pops up right away. So you became affiliated with her. And how did that happen?
Well, it happened basically through my kids. Can you imagine this? Because I have two kids. I have a boy that's 13 years old and a girl that's 15. They both play tennis. And I own my own academy in Brazil. And I wanted to give them the experience that I had to come into the US and study and play tennis at a high level in both things. So outside of the US, it's tougher for you to do academics and sports at the same time and be successful at both. And that's the choice I had to make when I was young. I was about to, my last year of high school, I had to choose if I was going to go almost just exclusively playing tennis or basically giving up tennis and just study. And I didn't want to do neither one. So I said, well, I'm going to the States because there you can study and you can play sports very organized at a high level. So that's what I did. I went through school, went to graduation of university. And that for me was a route to be successful in life. Now, I wanted my kids to do the same thing. And I was seeing that in Brazil, we had the very same difficulty that I had, quite a few years back. So I said, let's move. Let's start thinking about, giving them the experience. And then, I got associated here with they came first, started training, and then I got associated with the academy. And then John and Chris, they offered me a position. And I brought all my experience of, my years in also owning an academy. And now I'm working with them. And then I see over here is very well established because we have 70 plus kids that are full-time kids that live at the academy, that study over here, that they train, very intensely all day. They study hard every day. They play tournaments on the weekends. So that environment is something that I wanted for my kids. And the Evertons Academy for me is the best place in the US to do it.
That's outstanding because, you mentioned the kids, and of course, the show is all about education. So I know most of you are well-known successes as an adult, but I believe you were quite an accomplished junior player as well. So can you tell us about the pressures of being in the limelight at a young age?
Yeah, I can't, at the age of 14, I was #2 in the world. So you can imagine how the expectations, not limelight, but, you start coming out and you're in the paper in your city at 14. You start, getting interviews and stuff like that. So I was very fortunate. My parents were very down to earth, and they basically gave me a normal way to grow. Obviously, they gave me support of playing tennis, but they also made sure that, my studies, my academics were going side to side. And that was for me, that combination made me, have a vision for myself, not just being a tennis player or not just being a student, in a way of combining both. I think the sport made me more an adult at an earlier age. So I had to mature. I had to, be more committed to a lot of things. I think if I wasn't doing sports at that level, at least, or any type of level, I wouldn't have that commitment that I had that grew on me because of having to train or having to study or having to, not go out on a Friday night because on a Saturday I either had to train or to compete. And those things were kind of making my life a little bit more mature at an earlier age. And that was giving me the success to kind of develop me as a tennis player and also as a student.
Excellent. Yeah, it's, that dedication. It's, people don't realize they know the glory, but they don't know the story all the time. Yeah. So that's excellent information. And I'm sure you work with so many young players. We often hear that sports is as much mental as it is physical. What's your philosophy that you share with young players that you coach based on the physical, the mental, the emotional?
No, I like to say that tennis is like a physical chess. You know, you have to combine your mind to kind of guide your body. So there are four phases that I like to say in kind of tennis, and I think that applies to every sport. Is the technical part. You know, how do you hit your ball? How do you do your jump shot? How you throw the ball? Your tactical, which means what do you do when you're playing? Your physical, you need to have conditioning. You need to be ready to endure during the competition. You need to be fast. You need to jump. You need to be, you know, flexible, etc. And what puts that all together is your mind game. So it's the mental part, it's the mental preparation. So I think in all four of those areas, you can actually work on for sure. And then you can excel in making sure that the mental part is the one that's going to glue everything together. So a lot of times I hear parents saying, oh, my kid is 13 and he needs a psychologist, a sports psychologist to get him better. But, you know, a lot of times they just need the experience also to develop, to experience the competition, to understand themselves, to know what they do well, what they don't do so well, and how that melts into a good strategy. So it's a melting pot that if you organize it by you know, sections, like I said, the simple 4 ones are those, you know, technical, tactical, physical, and mental. Although if you get to the professional level, you can start breaking it down into very details. And that's when it starts getting, you know, very specific, very professional, and very fun too. But then I think that the core is prepare yourself to, you know, dedicate, pay the time that you need to have to you know, a proper technique, know your strength, know your weaknesses, kind of melt it together, get prepared physically, and then have a clear mind to put it all into place when you go to competition.
Ricardo, I have a question for you that has to do with parents. When you speak to parents, and say, for instance, you bring them in and you say to them, listen, I want to talk about your child, because needless to say, there's a real, how would I describe it? It's like you need to have a lot of emotional strength to compete with all the other players. You have to have it, because if you don't have it, it's a disaster. But bring in the parents. And what do you tell them? Because I think they play such a role in getting their children to be great tennis players.
Parents, for me, we like to call that there's a good triangle when you're developing a player. The triangle is what? The player, the coach, and the parents. Now that triangle has to work, has to have harmony, and by that I mean, you know, each one has a relevant, let's say, a relevant job to do. Obviously, the coach is giving the technical support, the vision of how the sport is being developed. And the player obviously executes, always has his own personality and how he's going to do it. And the parents have to give the support for the coach and for also the son or the daughter. And how you make that work, my experience is, I've worked with kids with men, and also with kids who are like the best in the world. You know, I've worked with a #1 player in the world. I've worked with number 10. I mean, and everybody has a dad and a mom, you know, so you always have the family behind. And how do you make that work? The experiences that I had that made it for me the best was when the family, the parent, the dad, the mom really gave the coach, or let's say myself, the freedom to do my job without the pressure of looking for the results. And the parents were actually very good at being parents in terms of the pressure that they put on their kids. It's a pressure that any parent would put in terms of character, in terms of values, in terms of, you know, a good direction in life. And obviously the specifics of the sport were left to me, or to whoever, you know, my coach, my fellow friends that were also coaches. I saw when those relations were good or not. When the parents started to transcend and trying to be, let's say, on court in terms of giving too much opinion, because obviously the son or the daughter, they listen to the parents, you know. So if you have conflicting voices going on, that's the worst position you can put an athlete on. So I think parents should be present. They should be giving their input, but in terms of life, in terms of giving the values, what they believe, their vision of life to their kids, and let the kid, let the player develop himself as a sportsman or a sportswoman in terms of, reaching their full potential as an athlete. So I think that composition is what makes it all work best. Although there's one thing, nowadays you see a lot of parents being coaches, and
I was going to ask you about that.
Mm-hmm. So now it's very delicate because sometimes maybe like myself, I've been a former professional player. I was, a top coach. I mean, tennis is my life. And I can basically, I don't jump on the court with my kids all the time. Although I love to coach them all the time, I keep a little distance. I trust the people over here at the academy that work with them. Obviously, I do some input and I'm very close, but, I'm not there. Now, some parents actually put the hat on and they go on court. And it is not easy to deal with that situation because, you're telling your kid to, wake up and take a shower, brush your teeth, do your bed, and, run for the forehand. It comes, sometimes it's too much. I see this work. I've seen this work on a tour level, which we do have, a few successful cases, but I've seen a lot not work. Most of the time it's very complicated to find that's kind of fine tuning that makes it work. It's not easy.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen it even in education when I've tutored kids and when I taught, they want to be the teacher, they want to be the tutor, they want to be the parent. I love your analogy of the triangle because when I've done workshops in schools, I believe in the triangle too. It's the school, the teacher, and the parent. And you really can't have true success. 2 out of 3 doesn't do it. It's the 3 out of 3. But when they cross that line, and that's a difficult line, you have to draw a line in the sand at some point as a coach also, because if they're hearing different things, they want to listen to and respect you. They have to listen and respect the parents. I'm glad that you've seen it work in some cases, but I'm glad you brought that up. So parents who are listening and viewing this podcast, you can pick up some great ideas and philosophies from Ricardo. Ricardo, what can you tell us about the experience of being part of the 1988 Summer Olympics? Because, tennis is a great sport, but there's tennis tournaments and there's Olympics. It's kind of like 2 different worlds. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
For sure. It was always a dream for me, from being a kid involved in sports to participate in the Olympics. And when I was called off to go to Seoul Olympics in Korea, it was one of the dreams come true. And then for me, the experience was being around the atmosphere of just athletes, of high successful athletes, the best athletes in the world, people that you saw on TV actually. And I was over there competing with them, being friends with them, seeing side by side. So I loved it because I was able to relate to each one depending on the sport. I could actually learn from a lot of the things that people were doing. So I was always very conscious that I could, taking best practices from everywhere else and what I could transcend it to myself and to my sport. I learned quite a few lessons in terms of how to be a team player because, in tennis, you're more an individual. It's an individual sport. We only have like doubles that it's that you share a court with someone. Right. And then if you're here in US or, you have your high school team, you have your college team, but otherwise in the whole world, we don't have that. Basically, tennis is individual. And when you go on the tour, you're basically on yourself. You represent your country. And the other thing you have is Davis Cup, but you don't have a sense of being a sport with a lot of people. So I was mingling a lot with the guys from the basketball team, from the soccer team, the guys from the volleyball team. I was learning some of the things and some of the practices that they had. And for me, that was an unbelievable thing. In the end, everybody, it's very similar, the experience and the focus, but then the way to get to the high level, everyone has a little path, So you're there with a guy that's, this tall, very short, but he can lift 500 pounds, with one finger. And the other guy is huge. Like, it was very funny. One day I was eating with the guys from the basketball team, and the guy had actually a whole chicken that he was going to eat. And I'm going, Jesus. And then I looked at him, well, okay, you got to eat the whole chicken because, your body, I can't eat the whole chicken. So some of the things that you start realizing, that you're there, and everybody in the end is looking to strive, is looking to be the best that they can be. And obviously everybody, being one of the biggest emotions that I had also I went to 2 Olympics, one as a player and one as a coach. So the opening ceremony is something really, really unique. It's really unique, having everybody in the stadium, everybody walking in, everybody in the same vibe, in the same kind of happy atmosphere. The whole world is looking at you. So it's very special to be part of that 2 times.
Ricardo, pardon me, Mark, I need to ask him, and I'm putting you on the spot, Ricardo, but was there one particular tennis person, and I say person, it doesn't necessarily have to be a player, somebody you worked with, who really stands out, somebody who you have high respect for, and also is a person who actually just stands out? Is there anyone?
Well, I think the way I grew up, I had like my idols at certain points of my career. So in the beginning, I loved a lot Bjorn Borg because he was very cool on court. He was like, you know, he had a persona of a guy that never really got distressed about anything. And I was more like McEnroe, you know, like very activated and, you know, arguing, you know, but, you know, I always looked at I saw some good things in McEnroe, I saw some good things in Borg. And then I think, you know, Arthur Ashe has a persona of someone that has done so much. I didn't have someone, to tell you the truth, someone that was really like a role model for me, but the people that really got my attention were the ones that transcended from the tennis court, the one that whatever they did on the tennis court, they meant something more. So guys like Ashe, you know, even Christy and Martina, what they did for the women's, you know, they played 80 times against each other. And by being fierce competitors, they also were friends at one point. They were very fierce competitors on court, but off court. But in the end, you see them nowadays and you see how much they kind of transcended the competition and made like tennis, women's tennis at that time, they made it boom all over the world because of them. You know, you have 2 different styles, 2 different personalities, and those things are the things that attract me the most. And I have one person in my life that, you know, kind of inspires me a lot, which is my mom. My mom is 87. She's going to be 88 next month, and she plays tennis 5 days a week. So wow. For me, it's something that, you know, it transcends me. It for me shows how much a sport can carry you on through life. And for her, you know, she doesn't look like an 88 years old lady. She looks more like a 70 because she moves, she plays, and her mind is so fresh because of the sport. So in that sense, I say that I started playing tennis when I was on her womb, because she said, hey, I was playing tennis up until you were 7 months. I was 7 months pregnant. So I said, oh, I was already hearing the ball then. So very funny.
Well, yeah, for sure. And when you mention, you know, it's not just tennis, it's not just a sport, because you go from tennis, which is exciting, you like to play the sport, to doing it competitively, which is exciting, to going to the Olympics. So it's interesting that I was thinking that all the tennis people ate together, all the basketball people ate together. And it's a great story because it's different sports and different cultures from all around the world. I mean, you can't mimic that anywhere. So it's an incredible thing. You've learned so much from it above and beyond the sport of tennis, which I think is important for our viewers to hear. Ricardo, what's the most important message you can deliver to our viewers today, keeping in mind that most of them are parents with young children or teens as children, and sports is on their mind, scholarships, playing, being a coach, taking a step back? What's the best message you could give to them?
Well, I think for me, it's making sure that, you know, like I did with my kids, I obviously they're playing tennis right now because it's their choice. In the beginning, when they're very young, I actually tried them to do a lot of other stuff. And my wife said, well, you don't want them to play tennis. And I said, I would love them to play tennis, but I don't want me to be the driving force on it. If they want to play it, I'll love it. I'll give them all the support, but it has to come from them. So I just want them to be around sports, because sports for me, they'll teach you values. They'll teach you a lot of lessons at an earlier age. So it will teach you how to win. It will teach you how to lose, how to understand the loss, how to dedicate. So that composition for me, if I was a parent, I would try to get my kids involved in any kind of sports. And the individual sports, something that make you mature a little bit more. Although you're more of a lone, if you swim, if you're a golfer, if you're a tennis player, it's more of an individual. Now, if you play a team sport, there's also different other things that open up. So that environment for me is something that I would advise every parent to get close to. Even if you didn't do it when you were young, you didn't have that experience, but because it's also, it gives you just the body type of, health that it brings you in being active, etc., which I think nowadays is a very difficult thing to get kids outside. We have the digital world, and, I know the issues because I have them in my house, hey, turn off the phone, we're going to sleep. Hey, turn off the internet, and on weekends, let's go outside and run, do a little jog, or let's go swimming, let's go for a bike ride or whatever. Oh no, I want to be on my computer, I want to see Netflix or what I say. So that for me is something that, it's got to be something to be very conscious and to do exercise, to be involved in sports. The better and the earlier you do, the easier it is for the kid to grow into the culture. And the culture for me is very good. And here in the US, I think people take it for granted, but here in the US, like I said, academics and sports, they gel in so well compared to the rest of the world. There's an opportunity you can't miss.
Definitely. That's sage advice, really outstanding advice for the viewers. Ricardo, how can we learn more about you and the services you offer?
Well, the Evertons Academy is a place where kids come when they inspire to be a better tennis players. We've had, Andy Roddick, who was #1 player in the world, training over here from 12 to 18. We've had, Madison Keys, who was a U.S. star, who's from here to from 11 to 17. Jennifer Brady, who was a semi-finalist at the U.S. Open this year. She was training here from 11 to 18. So we developed high-level players, but we also developed quite a few players who have gone to have great collegiate careers playing tennis and great persons, people with success on their careers outside of the court. So it's like a mix of competition, academics, and values, So we have a school that inside the academy, which is a private school, very high level academics. Everything is in the sync with the tennis training. So they train 5 hours a day. They go to school. They eat in the academy. They do have some fun activities to do. We pride ourselves here in development of players, boys and girls. Not a whole lot of academies have the same ratios. We have basically 50% boys, 50% girls. Most academies is more like 80%, 75% boys to girls. So our atmosphere is really good about that. They compete a lot. So they have, life learning values that they learn on the court. So that is the whole spectrum of it. And it also depends on the families and what they're looking for their kids. A lot of families will like their kids to be the high performers, really top high performers, which we can deliver. But I know some other ones also like to have what I said, high academics, high expectations in terms of sports, develop as a person. We can do that really, really well too. So the atmosphere of the academy is very family oriented, which I think it makes a lot of difference. We're not a huge academy of having 250 kids, but we're not a small academy of 20, 30, or 40. We are almost between 70 to 100 kids. We have our own dorm, our own school, a nice 23 courts, clay courts, hard courts. That makes a complete experience for everyone. And we're based in Florida, Boca Raton, which is basically playing outdoors all year. So near the beach. I think you can't complain.
Can't beat that. Ricardo, Susan and I can't thank you enough for joining us today and sharing your incredible story with us, your expertise. I think your philosophies are spot on as far as young players. So thank you so much for that. We really appreciate you being here today.
And I thank you as well, Ricardo. It's been a real pleasure to have you on our show. Thank you so very much.
Well, Mark and Susan, thank you very much for the opportunity. Great to know that you guys are doing a great job. So thanks again.
Thank you. And viewers, remember to reach out to us on social media. Look for Great Success on Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. You can also find me, Mark Hoberman, on LinkedIn. Again, Ricardo Acioly, thanks for being with us. Susan, as always, thank you. And viewers, don't forget to tune in to our next podcast. This is Mark Hoberman Thanking you for watching the podcast, Lighting the Educational Flame, on the Grade Success Education channel on NETV. Have a great day, and we hope we see you soon.
Thank you for listening to Lighting the Educational Flame with Mark Hoberman. To contact Mark, email him at info@gradesuccess.com.